special edition of the Sports Insiders this Thursday evening. Just want to remind you, everybody, to go to the applications of the sorry the stores of iOS and Android to download the Single TV application where you can watch all our programming. Remember that Single TV can also be found across Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, and Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Remember as well to go after the show to the respective stores and leave us a comment and a rating. We want to hear what you have to say about the shows that we have to present you. With us tonight on this special edition are Mr. Candid Frank Stanishi and Mr. David Marasuri. And we are going to dedicate this show to the wonderful world of football. Good evening, Frank. Good evening, David.
Good evening, Eduardo.
Good evening, Eduardo.
So, where do we want to start? Want to go NFL? Do we want to go USFL? Do we want to go NCAA? Or we want to go CFL? Everything is available to you guys.
One thing I wanted to bring up before we even get into the NFL, the national championship game that happened this week.
Well, we got an hour, right?
Yeah. Have you ever seen a more uncompetitive game of football ever played on a national stage?
Yeah, last year's.
So Georgia is now the new king of college football. Is that where we're at right now at this point?
Well, we just switched. It went from Alabama to Georgia. Before it was Oklahoma.
Yeah.
In those stages, SEC schools tend to dominate.
They have recently, and they will continue to until, well, to the leading question that you're asking about that kind of game that was on the air for people to watch. I think it was 37 something at half, 37-6 or something at the half. Most of the TVs were turned off by then.
Mine was, for the most part.
Yeah, the game itself drew no interest. In fact, the only interest that game drew was the Googling of the name of the team that was playing Georgia.
TCU, Texas Central University.
Whatever you want to call them, you can't. This is a team the year before had a very poor record. They had a very big improvement. They ended up with a better record this year. And as you probably know, guys, their coach won the Coach of the Year, which is great. But to answer your question, no, I have not seen that bad a game since the Argos a couple of years ago at home against a few teams. So I've seen games like that, but in a championship game, that's a different story. I defy anybody to recall a game of that kind of disparity in a championship. This was the last game of the season. We're not talking about a middle of the season game where you got two teams playing each other and one is far superior than the other, but only because they have to play the other team. This was a designed game. In itself, the designers really screwed that one up, David. I think that's what happened there. That's the bottom line on that game.
Well, and this was the first year of expanded playoffs for college football as well. And a lot of people are saying that this is what happens when you expand the playoffs. You necessarily don't get the best two teams going off against each other. A lot of people said that TCU deserved to be there, but at the same time, I don't think I've ever seen a team that was supposed to be there look like that.
Yeah, let's be clear. They earned their way there simply by judgment. The reporters and the committee that picked these two teams to be the two choices for the championship, they dropped the ball, and the proof's in the pudding, right?
Well, they didn't choose them; they fought their way there. There were a semifinal and a final, but the one true fact is that they don't want to see a Big Ten school in the finals ever, and that's how they were technically placed. Georgia against Ohio, Michigan against TCU. Michigan blew it. I have to say, Harbaugh didn't do his job properly for the first time in a long time. He had Michigan always fails at the end when they have to win.
Hmm.
2 years they make it to the semifinals. 2 years they blow it way out.
How did the SEC teams get eliminated, David?
Well, I mean, it's kind of just the imbalance, right?
That's my point. How did they get eliminated?
Well, they're just not good. Like it's a matter of rankings and just not being good enough.
And the rankings, how do you get to the rankings?
It's how you play during the season.
Right. And so what happens is you judge a schedule against another schedule, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not a perfect system. The college football playoffs has never been a perfect system, but at the same time,
Neither is the season though. That's the where they fail. The Georgia played, I think it was 3 out of conference games the whole season, while Michigan played 9.
What about Alabama? They lost 2 games by 1 point at the end of each of those games. And the value of those losses was far more negative for them than it was for LTC losing 1.
mm-hmm.
The
Yeah,
SEC doesn't play out of conference. That's the big issue.
I think there's also this fear, I think, with everybody involved, whether it's overt or subtle, that nobody wants to see 2 SEC teams play for the championship. Even though probably at least 2 of the SEC teams could probably be considered the best in the country. Alabama's not a bad team.
I mean, if you think about the SEC conference, you have tough, very tough schools
Best.
in Oklahoma, Alabama, Florida State, Georgia State, and TCU sneaks into the background.
The I guess the point, David, I'm trying to make, and I don't know, I'm dying to hear what you think. It's basically a formula that allows for teams that aren't as good to make it through by virtue of a path that allows them to do it. That's the best way I can describe it. And this championship, the college championship, because there are so many divisions, because there are so many schools, because there are so many teams competing for that one spot to be the most, the glamorous team, the best team, college football team in the country. They don't have the schedule or the time to schedule something that gets to the very best and eliminates those that aren't. So you'll end up with this kind of thing.
mm-hmm. Yeah, you are, and look, like it generates some buzz for for the schools that they want to try to get into those playoffs, and maybe they're trying to avoid the situations where it's the same teams over and over again. I get that, but it just seems when it's happening in a certain way, and it's right now, I don't think it's doing what it was designed to do completely. I think there's still some tweaks that need to be made about it. I get the spirit of it, but I
Yeah,
think
they're trying to be inclusive. Absolutely.
they are. And look, there's so much money involved when it comes to NCAA sports. That's the other part of it too. Is like you have to, if you want to give these other schools a reason to invest in their programs in the same way. I mean, not every program is going to be able to invest with Georgia, Alabama, even Michigan, uh, Ohio State. What are like? I could pick off so many schools that just have it feels like an infinite budget, and then you get these other ones that are like, well, we can't compete on that level when it turns of like recruitment and all those things. This is supposed to give them a little bit more incentive to say, well, there's a better chance now of you getting onto that national platform, and more players wanted to come and more, more ways to try to increase your school's, I guess, standing within, the NCAA. What's the word I'm looking for? NCAA, mecca there is.
The one of the big issues that I see with the NCAA is that they have switched teams into the big conferences to try to make it more attractive for the alum to support their teams. I mean, if you think about, Rutgers was never in the Big Ten, is now a Big Ten school. You know, Villanova was not a Big Ten school, now it's a Big Ten school, and they kind of distorted the way it was before, in that you had all the schools from the Central in one bracket, so that they didn't have to travel as far, and it was more concise. And you had two divisions in the West Coast, and and three in the East, because of time zones. And it was much better. Like, I mean, when you had the Ivy League schools playing against their own, it was so much better than what is now. And you really created those rivalries, and you got uh, an idea that Notre Dame and Duke could make it to a national championship.
And those are teams that the NCAA wants to see in those or at least trying to compete for those championships as well.
Yeah, I mean, you I don't remember the last time that I saw a, a Western Conference team in the national championship. I mean, and I don't know if you remember, David. I mean, you have been around the game for a while. There were four major bowls. It was the Rose Bowl, Orange Bowl, Citrus, and Aloha, and those were the four competitions that people vied for. Now, with the creation of the national championship, now it has become, a fight for, oh, we don't want to make it to Citrus Bowl, we don't want to make it to such and such a bowl, we want to make it not to the playoff of the national championship.
Do we want to move on to the NFL now? What was supposed to be a quick conversation turned into a quarter of the show.
Well, I guess in conclusion, you alluded to the fact that this is on the way to being fixed. In other words, there's just some tweak left. Help me understand what that tweak could be.
In terms of,
like, what is it? What's missing that allowed for that poor game that happened? Like, what I mean, there's ways to look at it. TCU had a challenge in front of them, right? They were the definite underdog, right? And there hadn't been this kind of national championship in like 25 years. There hasn't been this kind of spread early. I mean, there's a lot of people that didn't bite on the spread, even though, as it turns out, they should have. So that's part of it too. I think, David, as well, is that it's the gambling that's associated with all the sports today. They're kind of there, and they advertise in all the sports, and it's really important to them. That's an important thing, and that's something I'd like to talk about next. If we can talk about that, gambling and the effect it's having. There's a story out right now that's talking about the concern with Wayne Gretzky, Austin Matthews, and one more player. Oh yeah, of course, Jesus of the Oilers. They are they're sponsored to promote gambling. And there are some people out there who are wondering, and I'm one of them. I really don't like the gambling advertising on the games. And I was reading an article, and it made a very excellent point that there's a lot of children there sitting beside their parents, watching the game and developing hero worship, for example, of Austin Matthews, and he's promoting gambling. And there's some concern about that. How do you guys feel about that?
Can I go first? Because
Yeah, 100%.
Go ahead.
I've been asked this before, and I say, well, do they advertise alcohol on those same broadcasts? They do. I don't think you see the smoking ads that you used to see before, so that's one that's been kind of done away. But there's other things that would be very questionable in the same lines of gambling. Now, I understand what you're saying, Frank, in that these are athletes who children grow up to want to emulate and want to be like. But here's the thing about gambling that a lot of people just kind of breeze over. It is very hard for a child to get into gambling because by the fact that you need a couple of things. One, a license. You can't get it into you can't open a gambling account without a form of government ID. So children and teenagers are safe from that. So by the time you're signing up for this, you're a full consenting adult. So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of that idea. But I will say there is a big push on it. And I always concerned that, you know what, when something like this comes up, it was just like when cannabis was brought on. It was just pushed in your face, and then it kind of flames out a little bit. Now, the gambling industry is a little different because of the idea of making money and all those things. But I just feel like if Austin Matthews, Wayne Gretzky, and Connor McDavid don't do it, somebody else is going to.
Yeah, no, I'm not picking on them. To be clear, I'm not. Insert other player. The point I'm making has nothing to do with which player. It's a player is more important to me. And obviously, the more popular the player, the more attraction they offer. But here's the other side issue. I'm going to give you that point and say, okay, that's cool. I'll agree with you there. The freedom to do that, the security that children can't gamble. I'll buy that. Sold completely. But what I want to know is, why is it so hard for Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, and Wayne Gretzky openly talk about how much they're being paid to do it?
Well, here's what I'll say about that. How much do Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid make in comparison to their peers in other sports of their level?
Well, that's it. That'd be the information that we'd be seeking, right? You and I have this conversation about the Canadian Football League all the time about salaries being out in the open, and we both agree that what's wrong with saying what the salaries are? Why don't we all get to know what everybody's salary is?
Well, and here's the thing. That's like that has nothing to do with it is a source of professional income, but then that means we have to ask every single actor, actress what they get paid to do a commercial, right?
We find out. We know. For the most part, we know all that. It's accessible information.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's enough that you're going to get a high price athlete. Like I don't think they're not doing this without getting a major pay raise. I do agree with that. There's probably a big there's probably likely a very big pay bump, but now more than ever, gambling is going to be playing a huge factor into a lot of things, right? It's changed the way that sports media is covering games now, and how much effort they're putting towards the gambling side of it, whether it's written content, audio content, and even video content. I mean, Eduardo, I don't know if on the network you guys have a betting show.
No,
like
that's one thing that I am against. The idea of, and I'll give you the reasoning. Sports have become a business more than a sport, and I believe in the purity of the sport. And one of the things that I am disappointed, so if gambling is allowed and players are allowed to promote gambling, so here comes my big point. We banned multiple players from their Hall of Fames because of gambling. Should they be allowed now to enter the Hall of Fame?
Well, here's the thing. It's all about rules, right? When the players are doing it, they full well knew that they were going against the rules, right? Now it's they're allowed to do it. I think,
Yeah,
now people will,
but
because
their stats are not based on gambling. Their stats are not based on gambling. Their stats are based on performance. So if you're open,
Is it just me or is Eduardo breaking up when he's talking?
now he's breaking up. I can't really hear him that well. You're kind of going,
Okay, we're having trouble hearing you, Eduardo. I don't know how you can hear us okay or not.
can you
But
hear me?
yeah. What I'd like to interject in agreement with Eduardo for a different reason is in society most people have decided that because marijuana is legal, there are a lot of people in jail who are in jail for a very long time for what today is acceptable behavior. So do we not think about treating them differently based on the rules of today and maybe suggesting that maybe we had it wrong, so we changed things? To Eduardo's point, I'm not suggesting either way to change the rules. It's not my responsibility or ability, but I think in the name of fairness, what Pete Rose did was bad, and that's who I think that. Yeah, so he's nodding. So I'm assuming that's one of the people that he's referring to.
Yeah.
If 10 years down the road they agree that you can use enhancement drugs in sports, does that mean the players recently who aren't they get the asterisk behind all their records? Does that asterisk get removed? I guess the point, David, is just confusion. We're both, Eduardo and I are creating confusion, but only because we're asking people to be judged equally. And that's when it comes to, to that kind of stuff. I agree with Eduardo that you have to ask yourself, were they being treated harshly? And I would like to think that when people are being treated harshly, down the road, we recognize it and we not necessarily compensate them, other than to emotionally say, you know what you were doing was not as bad as I thought. And because of that, I think I should at least allow you the opportunity to feel as though what you did wasn't as wrong as we made you feel it was, because it's all about personal well-being, and that's important.
So just to add a little bit to what Frank said, because he brought one of the players that I'm giving consideration for. Yes, he did bet in the game of baseball, which was illegal. But the question is, there is nobody that can predict or enhance his performance based on a bet. And Pete Rose never bet on games of Cincinnati while he was a manager with Cincinnati, nor he bet when he was a player with Philadelphia or Cincinnati. Pete Rose.
To be clear, Eduardo, he did bet on Cincinnati, but he never bet on them to lose. That's the distinction that he made.
And his performance on the field as a player, which is the criteria to get into a Hall of Fame. We don't go on anything else. It's the criteria of, can you assure yourself, can someone tell me that because he placed a bet on himself to bat a home run, that's possible? You don't know what ball is coming down. You don't know how the ball is going to travel. His performance in the field is completely absent from the betting.
When I think about even Pete Rose specifically, I think it's time, yes, that maybe baseball just buries the hatchet, and they're sort of doing it little by little, but You know what? He can't take back what he did. I get that, but at the same time, now that, yes, as Eduardo was saying, gambling is prevalent. Are we gonna like continue to make him suffer in a way? At the same
Absolutely.
time, but at the same time, if we're like, in fairness, he broke a rule. Like it's just like the players, as Frank brought up with steroids and stuff. They're being punished for breaking a rule. So it's not like they're being unfairly punished. But now I think that with gambling turning into the phenomenon that it is, it'd be a little hypocritical if we continue to have Pete Rose be the poster child of what he did, when now it's okay. Although there are players in the NFL, the receiver Calvin Ridley for the Falcons, who was suspended for the full season for gambling. So it's not totally out of the woods yet there.
So
Yeah, and it's mostly important that if they're betting, they're not betting against their team, because that's an obvious opportunity for somebody to affect a game. You don't want to see that. So morally, I'm going to say this. My last thing I'm going to say about Pete Rose, morally, he did nothing wrong. And David, you're 100% right. He broke the rules. But what he did, Eduardo, wasn't morally wrong. It was factually wrong, if I can word it that way.
so I have another question for you guys, because this is the part where I don't like what's going on in right now in the world of media. We we have become a betting addiction media in sports. There is more shows about how to bet on sport than there is about the sport itself. And where do we go? Are we going to transmit games, or are we going to transmit? Well, if he will hit the ball this way,
You want to go first, David?
Eduardo, we know exactly the reason why. Especially if you look at sports radio and in broadcasts where advertisement sponsorship are down and companies need to find a way to recoup some of that revenue, betting is the way to do it now. All these sports books spend a lot of money on marketing, on sponsorships. Look at FanDuel with the Super Bowl. I don't know if you heard about the Super Bowl halftime event that they're going to be having, where Gronkowski is
Rihanna.
Like that's just now where we're at this point in time with sports gambling. It's the big phenomenon because that's where all the revenue is.
Well, that's where all the people are.
Yeah.
That those specific companies go after. They're the perfect, it's all about who you're after, right?
But does it make sense? Like, and it's not.
I'll answer the question, Eduardo. I'll answer that question like this: where are we going with this? Where we're going with this is, as long as it provides a profit stream for, let's just talk about the NFL. For the NFL owners, the NFLPA, the advertisers, the networks, the broadcasters, in other words, as long as it's a big enough monetary stream, there will be a way of it being involved. Because when alcohol and cigarettes were canceled in advertising in sports, they were the lion's share of advertising. It took a lot for them to recover. This is just another, it just seems, whether it's because it's a weakness, a thing that some people think people shouldn't do, a forbidden, either it's a forbidden habit or a forbidden action. At the end of the day, as long as money and profits are affected positively, Eduardo, gambling's going to be a part of it, until on the other side, and this is, David, where when you were talking about the alcohol and cigarettes, the reason you were talking about it is because there's the bad that cigarettes did and there's the good they did in advertising. When the scales start getting tipped to the point where the bad overwhelmingly is a problem, you get the government steps in and says, you know what? we can't have the most popular place for them to advertise. End of story. So they're not allowed on the media because you're a bad thing and we're trying to stamp you out. Right now, gambling is not in that position. But David, to look at Eduardo and to listen to Eduardo, I'm not in the same boat as him. I'm not so hard fast against it. But Eduardo's side's going to gain steam every time something happens negatively because of gambling.
Mm-hmm.
But Eduardo, to David's point, there are fail-safe mechanisms. There are ways that they approach on the as you know, if you watch and if you don't turn off the TV when they're doing their thing, Eduardo, they give all kinds of warnings and they have fail-safe mechanisms within the game. And I'll let David, who's more of an expert about this than I am, he mentioned a few earlier. David, you know the point I'm trying to make.
Look, I'll give you a good one. Someone I know wanted me to bet for them because they were in Canada, but they lived in the States. So they're not allowed to bet in Canada when you live in the States because the app is geo-blocked in a way. So he asked me to bet, and I have limits on what I can bet in a day. And I told him, this is my limit. I can't go past it.
They're limits that you create, right? They're ones that you create.
Yeah, they're already kind of, or you have to change them because they already come with a default one.
Yeah.
Change it. But the big one here is if I want to make that change, it's not like, let's say I decide, I want to increase my daily betting limit from $100 to $200. I can't do that within a span of 5 minutes. It takes time for the process to be reviewed and for it to get done. And the reason is somebody with a gambling addiction might want to say, you know what? If I just had $50 more to bet today, I think I can make money. But these gambling apps are smart and they're not going to let that person do it to protect themselves because this could be a situation where, this person's increasing. Let's give it 24 hours. This person will then
cooling off period.
Cooling off period. It's very neat how they do it. And yeah, and you can't just throw money in without having a verified way of putting money in as well.
My issue is not the betting.
Controlling the. Sorry, Eduardo. Go ahead.
My issue is not the gambling. Okay, that's not my issue. My issue is the effect on sport. We had it in professional sports first, and it started with boxing. That was the first side of betting in sport. That became a legal thing. Then we came down to football, and we came down to baseball and hockey. But at a professional level, okay, no problem. Now you are getting into college ball, into college sports with the gambling. Are we going to get to the high school level and force young kids to be pressured that they have to succeed because if not, someone might kill them?
Well, here's what I'll say to that. Not every sport is available. Like I don't think there will be a time where they will do that for amateur sports. First off, if you're betting on amateur sports, you might need to rethink your gambling approach and kind of what your motives are. I don't see that happening because sportsbooks, there's too much liability. This is the one thing sportsbooks have to be careful of is now you get into the situation where in amateur sports, it's there's not that screening process like there is in professional sports where there's code of conducts, there's people who can there's enough infrastructure to make sure that the integrity of the sport is kept proper, right? Amateur sports, you can't regulate that in the same way you can with professional sports. So I understand in high school and especially in the States, it's done a lot differently here in Canada. I don't think you'll see that. You're not going to see a betting show about gambling on high school sports. First, I don't think there's going to be the appetite for it, and secondly,
Is that I'm glad you explained that, because I wasn't sure. I didn't understand, mainly because for me, I can't really make out what Eduardo's saying. So Eduardo, you're worried about
he's
how
worried about high school athletes. If you're allowed to bet on high school sports and high school athletes, they think that there's pressure. People will be pressure on them to perform with that added, idea that people are gambling on their games. That's the very reason why I don't think it'll happen. It wouldn't be a
so
smart way.
gambling will motivate players to play better, Eduardo? That's your concern?
Or
No.
do the opposite.
Or they will feel the peer pressure of performing at the highest level, and if they don't succeed, they will be looking behind their backs because
Oh, okay. So you're saying
a professional
the peer pressure that already exists.
Yeah.
So I think I understand what you're saying, because when you refer to the peer pressure you're referring to, the way you're defining it, that peer pressure exists today. You're saying that because of gambling, it'll be exponentially raised to where it's not controllable by any individual athlete, where they'll get buried by a big wave of emotion as far as playing well and the pressure for winning on a personal level. I don't think you're even saying just from the other athletes. You're talking about people who know them, who are gambling on them.
Exactly.
And they don't have the protection that maybe adults have.
Exactly.
To deal with that pressure. Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. That's, again, I put the scales together, profit, the profit is the good thing for sports. And then what's the negative side, and what happens on the negative side for this relationship, gambling and sports. The negative side, Eduardo, you've highlighted one that I believe, under David's definition and David's understanding, he'd say to you, I think this is what you said. If you didn't, David, I'm glad I'm saying this. If you did, I apologize for not understanding you say it. But it's going to be incumbent upon the people who profit from that to protect, if there are any issues that are raised, any social downfalls because of the gambling. I believe, we don't know how long it'll last and how in control they'll be, but there will be actions taken to protect those children if that becomes a clear indication of an act or a situation that is coming up. You would hope, anyway. I would hope so. I would hope that the byproduct of gambling doesn't reach children, and then those children feel the pressure of the gamblers needing to win their bet and being blamed for them not winning the bet, which is, I think now I understand better, that's essentially what you're saying. And I'm really cutting it to, I'm really...
Look, have you ever watched, there's a Netflix documentary on the scandal involving Arizona State University back in the day, NCAA basketball, where players were given money from gamblers to, pretty much help them win their bets.
Right.
Right?
Beat the spread, all that stuff.
You can't totally police it completely. You can't totally police it. What you can do is you can mitigate, and it's what a lot of sports books do, is they're going to put safeguards on games. Like, let's say they end up allowing betting on those high school games. They're not just going to let people throw down bets on whatever they feel like. The sports books get smart, and they avoid the bets that are gonna put them in a pickle. Let's just say. But when you're just the only way you can protect the kids is if you don't have that as an issue at all. If you take away that problem to begin with.
What you're saying, David, is identifiable data that shows and that throws up a red flag that there's something funny maybe going on here.
So
yeah,
let's move on to the games of the NFL for this week, because
I was going to say, let's. I think we've buried this I think we've talked this conversation to death a little bit.
Okie dokie. What game you want to start with?
Well, let's start with the one that matters. Well,
The
I
one
wouldn't
that
say the matters the
matters
most.
for
The
the
one
people
that
near us.
I think the one that's I hate to say it, but I think the one's going to be an automatic loss already, and that's the Bills and Dolphins.
Oh boy. I think this is the most obvious win, right?
Yeah.
But as the most obvious win, it's ripe for an upset. Now, I'm not suggesting that there will be an upset, but I am suggesting that because of the high emotional state here, what we saw, put it this way, can we see a repeat of Buffalo playing as well as they did in their last game?
Yes, I really do. They're going to be at home. The Dolphins are starting their third string quarterback, who barely beat the Jets, who are a terrible team. I mean, terrible. And when you're comparing the Jets to Buffalo, it's not even close. Look, the Dolphins will do their best defensively to try to mitigate the Bills, but they're on an emotional high right now. They're going to be at home. They know. I just think that this is, if you look as a game, and if you're betting on, I mean, look, money line and whatever, you're going to take the Bills. The spread, who knows? I just think the Bills right now, they're the most dangerous team because they have more to play
Race.
for, not just on the field, but off the field. That's a dangerous team to go up against.
And they've got a quarterback that's a little bit better than the one they're playing against.
You couldn't even if Tua Tagovailoa was playing in this game, I would still say Josh Allen would. Now, what makes the Dolphins team offense something you have to respect is you got Tyreek Hill on one end and Jalen Waddle on the other end, and they have a decent running game. But that's still not going to be enough because I think the Bills are going to I think they're going to put up at least 30 points in this game. And I just don't see the Dolphins being able to do that. But I've seen weirder things happen. I saw the Raiders take the 49ers all the way to overtime with a backup quarterback that nobody would have expected. So I've seen weird things happen this season. But in the playoffs, where the stakes are so high, I don't think Buffalo will allow that to happen.
We can say the same thing about what happened last season with Cincinnati. I mean, Cincinnati wasn't supposed to get there.
They have an elite quarterback, right? That's the thing. But the Dolphins don't have enough. The Dolphins barely have a passable starting quarterback. That's the problem.
Yeah,
that's my issue with that.
No, and playing at home, snow is expected. The Dolphins are in big trouble.
Yeah, they are. Anything you want to add to that, Frank?
Well, I think it's important. I think it's important to note as well that the Buffalo defense in this game, even though they're missing the number 3, that's gonna be that defense. I'm saying, I'll say at this point that I believe that defense will put 14 points on the board.
Yeah,
I really believe that. And what does that mean? Well, that means that the Buffalo offense, which you get accredited with 30 points, I don't know how many of those points belong to the defense in your mind, but I could see this. I could see them going a little, halfway up the 30s.
I think defensively they scored 2 kickoff returns for a touchdown in their previous game as well.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that either. How many points are going to get off that?
They have the special teams as well. I mean, you saw it.
Yep.
I just think it's just more so their offense was firing in that game against New England. They were getting those deep balls. They're getting those deep plays. And if the only thing I will say about the Bills, I'm still not convinced about their running game. And that has been their downfall in the playoffs the last few years. They just haven't had that running game that they can rely on. But in this sort of game, unless the weather is just totally...
Yeah, but David, Buffalo hasn't had a running game since Thurman Thomas. So
yes, that's true. But they found ways to get past it, but it has cost them in games where they just haven't been able to close it out just because they have to rely on Josh Allen's arm way more than he does. I know he wants to play hero ball, but I don't think necessarily the Bills want him to.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think this game is as predictable as games get. As I said, it just makes for that much more of an upset. And I do think it doesn't matter how the game starts. I think what we'll see, and I believe the motivation of Buffalo, like you said, they're very they're ready for this game. Their guy is going to be on, at the very least, he'll probably be on the sideline, I would guess. It's
He's-
up to him
If he's
when he wants to join the team. The team said whenever he thinks he's ready, he's welcome to come. So whether it is to start, to play, or just to be there, the fact that he can be there and probably will be there, man, that's going to be a motivator. That's, I don't know of, through my life, a situation like this. I might have seen once or twice in my whole life, and I've lived quite long.
So I want to touch. We have about 3 minutes left in the show, but I want to touch on another game, if you don't mind,
Oh, absolutely.
because it's going to be an interesting game, and that's Tampa against the Cowboys.
The Cowboys have never beaten Tom Brady.
Do you want my opinion on this game? People are making a big deal about Dak Prescott's interceptions, and yes, that is a problem. You can't ignore it. What Tampa needs to do if they want to win this game, and they did it back in week 1, take away the running game from the Cowboys, and the Cowboys offense is lost. In my opinion, that the Cowboys running game, when it's not producing and it's not able to keep the offense in rhythm, that offense against Washington was terrible because the running game was out of sorts. And
What
that's
are you saying? What are you saying? The Dallas passing game needs a run game.
it does, because the problem is that the Cowboys receivers, you can only really trust one, and that's CeeDee Lamb. Dalton Schultz, I feel like, has been misused. He should be used more, considering the Cowboys don't have that other option. Michael Gallup hasn't played well. Noah Brown has played well, but has also made some very critical errors. So in this game, I think what the Cowboys are going to have to do is they're going to have to find a way to get to Tom Brady. That offensive line has had their issues. Their running game is not one that they've been able to rely upon. But I think Mike Evans is primed to take advantage of this Cowboys secondary. It has been very, very suspect. And Mike Evans had a very big game. Cost me a fantasy football championship because I played against him. So I know that Mike Evans, he's found his groove, and that's what Tampa Bay has been missing all year. Tom Brady hasn't had those weapons step up. He hasn't had that offensive line provide the running game that Tom Brady can, manipulate in terms of, how he calls the game. So the Cowboys, like, I'm not favoring the Cowboys are favorites. I don't consider them favorites just because they don't play well on the road. They don't play well in open air stadiums where elements can be a factor and all those things. And you saw that, you look back at that week 1 loss that they had, Tampa's just going to look at that and they're going to try to repeat the same formula in this game.
And how do you bet against Tom Brady in the playoffs?
It's very hard to do that.
Like him or not.
Oh, he's a very hard quarterback to bet against in the playoffs. But in this situation, he hasn't. I think he has other things in his mind that are preventing him from concentrating. And this is a different Tom Brady that we have seen in seasons past. A very different Tom Brady.
I will say this though: when it matters most, Tom Brady brings it. He always does. He finds a way.
And one of the things that is going to affect him is his kids won't be at the stadium to see him play for the first time in the playoffs.
And the other thing is, today the news is out now that he, his wife, and some other famous people are involved in that $1 billion scandal.
Correct.
So he does have a lot on his mind.
Yeah. So it's going to be an interesting thing. The other game that is going to pick the attention of a lot of people will be the Vikings and the Giants. The Giants are moving forward. I don't know how. It has been a surprise season for the New York fans. So I commend them that. But with that, gentlemen, we have to go. It has been our time has collapsed. So in the name of Mr. Candid Frank Stanishi, Mr. David Morasuri, the Guru, my name is Eduardo Harari. This has been the Sports Insiders on Cinco TV's channel 249 to 50. And until Sunday, when we come to you again on this same channel, we bid you farewell. And remember, the Sports Insiders, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Because the Sports Insider is sport, and sports is the Sports Insider, along with the fading Frank Stanishi. And until then, thank you very much for watching this show.